The Bolsheviks used sulfuric acid, fire, and 2 burial pits 70 meters apart to ensure no one could ever identify the Romanov remains. For 90 years, 2 of the Tsar's children stayed missing. No bodies. No proof. Just silence that spawned imposters and one of history's most enduring myths. Ancient DNA finally broke through, but this story begins in a basement on one night in July 1918. Shortly after midnight on July 17, 1918, the Romanov family was roused from uneasy sleep by Yakov Yurovsky and his squad. Nicholas II, Alexandra, their daughters Olga, Tatiana, Maria, Anastasia, young Alexei, and 4 loyal attendants, 11 people in all, were marched down to the basement of the Ipatiev house. The Tsar carried his son. Alexandra leaned on her maid. No one spoke. In the cramped, whitewashed cellar, Yurovsky read a brief sentence from the Ural Soviet. The family was to be executed. The squad raised their pistols. The first volley thundered, but chaos erupted. Some bullets ricocheted off hidden diamonds sewn into the girls' corsets, leaving them stunned but alive. Shouts and gunfire filled the room. The children and their mother were finished off at close range. Bayonets and bullets used until the basement was silent. The bodies lay tangled, smoke hanging in the air. In those minutes, the last hope of the Russian monarchy vanished. What happened to the bodies and the truth would remain hidden for generations. Bolshevik officials wasted no time trying to erase every trace of what happened in the basement. Telegrams from Ekaterinburg to Moscow on July 17th ordered not only secrecy, but the physical destruction of evidence. 3 jugs of sulfuric acid were requisitioned by the Ural Soviet Commissar of Supply. The bodies, stripped of clothing and valuables, were doused with acid and burned in a forest clearing outside the city. The intention was clear: to dissolve flesh, obliterate faces, and make recognition impossible. But the plan faltered. The first grave, a shallow pit near the 4 brothers' mine, proved too obvious. Fearing discovery, the executioners dug a second trench about 70 meters away, splitting the group, 9 bodies in one pit, 2 in another. Both sites were covered in quicklime and camouflaged with brush. Soviet orders demanded silence. Official reports claimed the family had been moved to a safer location. Sokolov's later investigation found only scorched earth and acid-eaten soil, but no names, no certainty. In the vacuum left by mutilation and misdirection, rumors took root. With no bodies and no proof, the world began to wonder if any of the Romanov children had slipped away. Berlin, 1920. A woman pulled from a canal claimed she was Anastasia Romanov, the lost daughter of the Tsar. She called herself Anna Anderson, and her story spread like wildfire. Newspapers printed her portrait next to faded photographs of the real Anastasia, inviting readers to compare every feature. Supporters flocked to her side, convinced by her accent, her scars, and her haunted eyes. Royal relatives visited, some leaving in doubt, others in awe. For years, Anderson's identity was debated in drawing rooms and courtrooms across Europe. The legal battle in Leipzig became a spectacle, with handwriting experts, surgeons, and distant cousins called to testify. The press devoured every twist, turning Anderson into a symbol of hope for those who could not accept the Romanovs' fate. Hollywood took notice too. In 1956, Ingrid Bergman starred in a lavish film bringing the myth to millions. On screen and in headlines, the idea of a surviving princess refused to die. Anderson's story became more than a personal claim. It became a cultural obsession, proof that mystery could outlast even the most brutal facts. Yet as the years dragged on, the world waited for something more than rumor and resemblance, proof that could not be denied. In the late 1970s, Alexander Avdonin moved through the dense woods outside Ekaterinburg with a hand spade and a secret. Guided by a copy of Yurovsky's note and an old investigator's map, he and his companion, Geli Ryabov, probed the earth near a forgotten railway crossing. Their search was driven by whispers and fragments, with no official permission and no public record. At a depth of about 1.5 meters, the spade struck rotted wood and then bone. The pit held tangled skeletons, some with gold dental work, others scorched and pitted by acid. Avdonin made field notes in a private diary, sketched the layout, and quietly reburied the bones to avoid Soviet scrutiny. For more than a decade, the secret stayed buried with the dead. By July 1991, as the Soviet Union teetered, Avdonin revealed the location to the Russian Academy of Sciences. An official team arrived at dawn, mapped the site, and began a careful exhumation. 9 sets of remains surfaced, including Nicholas, Alexandra, 3 daughters, and 4 attendants. Each bone was logged, bagged, and entered into a chain of custody ledger. Forensic anthropologists documented bullet wounds, acid etching, and signs of burning. But 2 children, Alexei and 1 sister, were missing. The gap in the grave fed new questions. The world now had bones, but not a complete answer. Only laboratory analysis could say for certain who lay in the earth and who, if anyone, might still be unaccounted for. In a Moscow laboratory in 1994, the search for proof turned to a molecule carried by every cell, mitochondrial DNA. Unlike the nuclear DNA that shuffles with each generation, mitochondrial DNA passes almost unchanged from mother to child. This quiet genetic signature became the first real forensic tool in the Romanov case. Scientists led by Peter Gill extracted fragments of bone from the exhumed remains, searching for a sequence that could speak across decades of silence. The breakthrough came by tracing the maternal line back to Queen Victoria, shared by Tsarina Alexandra and her children. Living relatives were rare, but one stood out, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. His blood carried the same maternal inheritance. The lab compared a stretch of mitochondrial DNA from the bones to Prince Philip's. The match was exact, down to a rare anomaly. A heteroplasmy at position 16,169, where 2 versions of the code coexisted. This subtle quirk, almost never seen outside the royal line, was the genetic fingerprint investigators needed. Published in Nature Genetics, the result left little room for doubt. For the first time, science had reached across a century and confirmed the Romanov family's fate, not by rumor or resemblance, but by an unbroken chain of maternal inheritance. Yet, even this powerful evidence would soon demand more. Tests that could answer every question and silence every myth. In a sterile laboratory, decades of rumor collided with the cold clarity of genetic evidence. Anna Anderson's tissue, preserved since her surgery in 1979 and tracked through every hand and freezer, was finally ready for the test that would decide her fate. Scientists in Moscow and London worked independently, each extracting mitochondrial DNA from the tiny fragment, an unbroken chain of custody linking hospital logbooks, signed shipping manifests, and barcode-tagged vials. The sequence they found was unambiguous. Anderson's mitochondrial DNA profile did not match the maternal line of Tsarina Alexandra, which had already been confirmed in the Romanov bones and Prince Philip's blood. Instead, it matched a Polish factory worker named Franziska Szankowska, whose disappearance in 1920 had gone almost unnoticed. The result was published in peer-reviewed journals and replicated in 2 labs, leaving no room for error or wishful thinking. In a moment, the longest-running royal mystery was stripped of its glamour. Courtroom drama, Hollywood fantasy, and the hope of a lost princess were all undone by a string of molecules. The myth of Anastasia survived in memory, but not in her DNA. For the first time, the way was clear to focus on the real missing children, the ones whose bones had yet to be found. Summer 2007 brought the final missing pieces to the surface. In a shallow pit, 70 meters from the first grave, archaeologists uncovered scorched bone fragments, part of a child's skull, a pelvis, and dozens of tiny shards, all bearing the acid scars of a hurried cover-up. The remains were flown under sealed custody to the Armed Forces DNA Identification Laboratory in Washington, D.C. There, the team began a forensic process that had never been attempted on such degraded, fire-damaged material. First, they extracted mitochondrial DNA, searching for the same rare heteroplasmy at position 16,169 that had linked the earlier remains to the Romanov maternal line. The match was exact. Next, they amplified 15 autosomal STR markers. the genetic fingerprints that can prove parentage and sibling relationships. Every locus lined up. The fragments belonged to children of Nicholas II and Alexandra, matching their profiles and those of the siblings from the first grave. Finally, Y chromosome STR analysis confirmed the male child's paternal line, identical to Nicholas II and his living relatives. All three systems, maternal, paternal, and autosomal, converged on the same answer. Statistical calculations left no room for doubt. The probability that these remains belonged to anyone but the Romanovs was less than 1 in 10 to the 94th power, a number so small it silenced even the most stubborn skeptics. In 2018, a final round of whole genome sequencing reaffirmed every result. After nearly a century of rumor and myth, science had accounted for every child. The story that began in darkness ended with names restored and history held to the light. In the end, the Romanov case did more than settle a century of rumor. The final DNA analyses, confirmed in 2018, brought every tool of modern science to bear on history's most persistent ghost story. That rare mitochondrial heteroplasmy at position 16,169, a genetic flicker found in fewer than 1 in 1,000 people, became a signature as distinct as a royal seal. Forensic teams working in labs from Moscow to Washington set new standards for how ancient, damaged remains could be authenticated. Every step was logged, every sample tracked with barcodes and chain of custody records, shaping protocols that are now used in mass grave identifications worldwide. The combined likelihood ratio, 1 in 10 to the 94th power, set a benchmark for certainty that has rarely been matched in forensic science. These advances did not just close the Romanov file, they forced a reckoning in institutions that had long resisted scientific intrusion. When the Russian Orthodox Church finally presided over the family's burial at the Peter and Paul Cathedral, it was not just a religious ceremony, but a public recognition that evidence had triumphed over myth. The legacy of this investigation reaches far beyond the fate of one family, showing how careful science can restore names, reclaim stories, and bring even the most stubborn mysteries into the light. A century of rumor collapsed under the weight of genetic proof. Today, DNA doesn't just rewrite legends. It holds power to confront denial, expose buried truths, and force even the most stubborn institutions to face evidence. The Romanov case reminds us in the end, science makes history answerable. Share your thoughts below.